The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello and welcome to this week's show of Weighted Donuts. I'm Wayne Unger, and we have a returning guest. It's always good that I didn't chase anybody away. And boy, I hope I don't mispronounce the last name, Danny Knobler.
Knobler.
And I think, you know what? I think I botched it last year too. Danny Knobler.
That's okay. Why mess with tradition, right?
Yeah. And Danny, you know, you have quite an impressive resume. Sports Illustrated, CBS Sports, I believe ESPN. You've contributed to, and I mean,
yeah.
And that's. I think I can you know, if I really wanted to go through it, I can easily add 10 more. 10 more as well. And we're talking about.
Yeah, I moved around
stuff
a little bit. Yeah, and I've been freelancing for the last 5 years, so I've written for a lot of people in that time. Most of my work now is on Bleacher Report, although I still write some for MLB.com, and I contribute to write for USA Today Sports Weekly, and there's always a chance of someone else calling and writing for them. So, and I'm actually in the process of working on a second book. So, yeah, I keep busy.
Excellent. Any? Do you want to give us a hint of the second book, or are you gonna keep tight-lipped for now?
Well, let's hold off on that for now. We'll talk about that. It's going to come out next year, so we can talk about it next year when it comes out.
Excellent. Well, but I hope I'll get you back before next year, though.
Sure. That's fine.
I just have to remember to catch you before you travel to Asia for a few months at a time.
Yeah, it's a little easier time-wise to do it from here. Although, who knows? Maybe we'll do a show from there too.
Oh, that would be great. So now you've written some pieces for Bleacher Report in the last couple of weeks, and as we were just discussing a moment ago, you wrote about Aroldis Chapman and how, you know, he was back up to 103 miles an hour. And as I mentioned, all of a sudden, as soon as you write that, just a few days later, boom, Jordan Hicks, 105 miles an hour.
You're right. And it may very well be that this will be the first year that since Statcast came in, which only a few years, but probably the first year since Chapman came to the big leagues, that someone else has thrown harder than him. But there's a lot of time left, and Chapman has a tendency to throw harder as the weather warms up, which we've had a little bit of warmer weather, but not much. And so there's always the possibility he's going to get up there, although 105 is pretty impressive. As he said in that column, he said to me, I asked him about Jordan Hicks, and he said, well, I'm an old goat. He's a young kid. He should throw harder. So, I think Chapman understands that there will be a time when there's somebody who throws harder than he does. But the main thing for him, I think he's proud of having been the guy who throws the hardest, even though he realizes that at some point someone's going to top him. But I think that what matters more to him is the way he's pitching. And this year he's pitching as well as he has in a few years, and you know, you could argue maybe as well as he ever has. And he's striking out a ton of hitters. 17 in the last 8 innings. His strikeout rate is higher than it has been. His ERA is down from where it was. He talks about how he feels healthier, and I know some of his teammates talk about for all the talk about his fastball velocity, they talk about how the command of his breaking ball has improved this year to the point where hitters really, as some guy says, it's just not fair. You have to worry about that breaking ball and then a fastball coming in maybe at 103. that's pretty tough. But it's good news for the Yankees. Obviously, they've had a lot of good news in a lot of different areas. But one of the things that hasn't gotten as much attention because of the offense and because the starting pitching has been better than I think some people expected up to this point is that the end of the bullpen has also been improved. That Chapman's been better than he was last year.
The Chapman has been better. The rest of the bullpen had a little bit of a shaky start, but just to put Chapman's year in perspective so far, if you do a projection, let's just say you projected his numbers to put him to a full season, he would have 70 innings pitched. He will have given up 33 hits, 0 home runs, 33 walks, and 133 strikeouts.
Yeah, and that would 133 would be a career high in strikeouts for him if he got to that point.
Yeah, I mean, again, just like a phenomenal season.
Right, and
you can't ask for anything more.
He turned 30 years old this year. Right, he turned 30 years old this year, but there's no sign he's slowing down. As I said, it's actually a better year than he's had the last few years. So far, to this point, we're near the end of May.
Yeah, I think when the Reds made the decision to have him abandon starting pitching and turn him into a reliever full time, that was probably, the key to his career, so to speak. Because until then, he was always getting hurt.
Yeah, I mean, there was always a question, and I was in spring training in Arizona a couple of the times when they were trying to try him out as a starting pitcher, and I watched him pitch one day, and I remember talking to him, and I asked him a question of what do you want to do, and he said that he thought of himself as a reliever. He preferred to pitch the ninth inning. And I remember going in and we talked to Dusty Baker and who was the Reds manager at the time. And Dusty said, Dusty loved that. That's what Dusty wanted. He thought that was where he was going to make the most impact. And I certainly can understand why some guys in the front office thought they wanted to try and see if he could be a starter because he has although he's basically a 2-pitch pitcher now out of the bullpen, he had multiple pitches he could throw as a starter. And as you said, he's on pace for 70 innings this year. There's always, when you have a talent like that, there's always the wonder of could he do it over 180, 200 innings? And is that more valuable to the team than having him pitch 1 inning at a time, 70 innings? And it's a question that's always going to be asked. It's not a question that has a definitive answer. I've looked into it in the past at times and asked a lot of people in baseball. I think it tends to be often a front office manager divide. Not always, but front office people tend to like having a guy throw more innings, get more innings out of a talent. Managers value closers because they know the impact. They know how hard it is on their team and on them to not have a guy who can nail down the ninth inning and do it the way Chapman has. So I don't know whether he would have had trouble staying healthy as a starter. I know he preferred to close, and he certainly had a very, very good career as a closer.
Absolutely. So now, speaking of Chapman and the Yankees, did you expect the Yankees to live up to their hype this year?
Well, I expected them to be a very good team and to have a lineup that would have stretches like the one they're going through now, where they were just pounding the ball and where they would go through and just destroy pitchers, especially average pitchers. I think the question that will have to be answered over the course of the season, and probably more in October than even during the season, is are they good enough against the best pitchers in the game? And last year, I mean, it went to 7 games, but in the end, Houston had the starting pitching that the Yankees, that could slow down the Yankee lineup and that the Yankee starters couldn't match. Now, we know that since then, the Yankees have added Stanton to the lineup. They've added Gleyber Torres, who hit a couple home runs against Bartolo Colon this week. They've added Andujar, but the Astros have also added Garrett Cole, and their rotation, if anything, is better than it was when the Yankees played in the playoffs. And we don't know that the Yankees will meet them. I mean, right now, if you looked at it, you've got to say that the Yankees, the Astros, and the Red Sox are the best teams in the American League, and maybe the best teams in all of baseball the way they've played so far, because there hasn't been a super team in the first 2 months in the National League. The teams that were talked about going into the year have, as the top teams, have underperformed. So at the moment, and we've got a long way to go till October, but at the moment, the Yankees, Astros, and Red Sox look like the best teams. And the question is going to be, do the Yankees match up when they see those teams' best pitchers? And we'll have to see. But they're a very good team, and I think they're in a lot of ways, yes, they are the team we thought they would be.
And talking about the teams in the National League that have underperformed, notably the Nationals, who are starting to turn it around. At least they're back over 500. They're only 3 games out, but and more importantly, the Dodgers. Do you see them? Where do you see them going?
Well, I think in both those cases, the nice thing for both those teams is there doesn't appear to be a team in their division, especially in the National League West, that you see just running away with things. And so the Dodgers and the Nationals, who are both favorites in their divisions, understandably so, if they can get themselves going, there's no reason they can't get themselves back to where they're potentially winning the division. Now, in the Nationals case, they've had to deal with a ton of injuries. The Dodgers have had to deal with some big injuries too. I saw that Kershaw may be coming back soon, but obviously Seager's going to be out for the year. They've had to deal with that. The Nationals have yet to have Daniel Murphy in the lineup. Adam Eaton has been out for an extended period. Rendon missed quite a while. Ryan Zimmerman has been out for quite a while. So when you look at it, especially for the Nationals, if they get their lineup back, there's no reason to think that they can't come back and end up becoming a super team and a team that you watch for in October. Max Scherzer is having another just outstanding season, maybe even better than he's been, which is hard to imagine given how good he's been the last few years. But they've had some issues in their bullpen, which they thought they'd fix the end of last year, but it hasn't been great the start of this year. And their offense has been inconsistent in part because of all the injuries. As for the Dodgers, they've had all kinds of things go wrong. But because, the Arizona got off to a great start in that division, but Arizona has hit a little bit of a skid themselves. And, Colorado's a decent team, but are they the team that's going to run away and win the division? It doesn't look like it. So if the Dodgers can get themselves righted, they might very well be still a team that can win the National League West.
Now, going to the East, do you think either the Braves or the Phillies, is there like a key trade that you think either one of them can make to actually stay afloat and stay with it through the end of the year, or give them, let's say, good probability?
Well, I think they're both very interesting teams. I liked both teams going into the season. They're two teams that are on the rise, very good young players. In some ways, especially in the Braves case, it's come around faster than I think they even expected. But, I think there's going to be an interesting question that the Braves are going to have to answer. A lot of teams have to answer this, but the Braves have to answer this kind of the way the Yankees did a year ago, when you have a young team, but you're unexpectedly in a race. How much of your capital in terms of prospects money, mostly in terms of prospects, do you expend to try to win now? And I think the Braves look at their future as being, this year is good, but beyond this year's got a chance to be very good. So I don't think they're going to. This is not a team, an all or nothing. Go for it now because this is it. Window's closing team. This is a window is starting to open team, and I think if they can make a move. Alex Anthopoulos, his first year there as general manager, we've seen before in Toronto, Alex is willing to take some risks if needed. He tried a no-risk deal with Jose Bautista, but it just didn't work out. Bautista didn't hit, and they had other guys they wanted to play. But the question, I think, and they were going to have him play, or they had him play third base. Third base is going to be the question. Right now they have Johan Camargo, a young guy playing there. They like him a lot. His numbers so far aren't great. There are going to be third basemen, it looks like, on the market, or left side infielders anyway. Do they go after? Does Alex, let's say, go after Josh Donaldson if the Blue Jays are willing to trade him? Somebody he had in Toronto. I don't know how much he's going to be willing to give up, but you could see them wanting to do that, or maybe wanting, even though their rotation has been pretty good, wanting maybe to add a better pitcher. I think the one thing for the Braves, and this probably applies to the Phillies too, although Phillies pitching has been better, I think one thing that applies, I don't know if either of those teams is going to look at it and think we can make a deal that can win a World Series for us this year. And I think both those teams are thinking we could develop into a World Series contender in the 2 or 3 years to come. We don't necessarily want to give away prospects who might help us become that World Series team, chasing something that might not be as exciting this year. But we'll see. We're only in May. They have time to make those decisions, and how their teams play over the next couple of months will help them make those decisions.
Talking about, trading, where do you see the deadline market going? Is there anyone are there a few players in your mind who you think to yourselves, they're definitely going to be moved?
Well, I mean, look, there are players who will definitely be moved. Now, the question is more in terms of the most exciting players, and probably the biggest, I shouldn't say probably, the biggest name that people are going to be wondering about is Manny Machado. The Orioles got off to a horrible start. Machado's a free agent at the end of the year. He's the type of guy who could obviously have a huge impact if he went to, depending on what team he goes to. I think he's going to be the one everyone's watching this year. Now, the Orioles in the past have not been an easy team to figure out, not necessarily an easy team to deal with. Peter Angelos is the owner. They supposedly nearly made a trade sending Zach Britton to the Astros last year, and then they had found a medical issue with someone in the trade and ended up not getting the trade done. The Orioles have a history of things like that, so it's hard to say for sure how that's going to turn out. But if you were watching one player, I think there's no question that's going to be the guy that, above all, everybody is paying attention to in July in the going into the trade market. That's that's as big a name as it gets to think of that he could be traded. I mentioned Donaldson earlier. That's another interesting name. There's going to be some relief pitchers. Kelvin Herrera with the Royals. The Royals are already open for business. No question they're willing to move players. Mike Moustakas, another guy, they re-signed on a 1-year contract. He's obviously, the Royals aren't going anywhere. He's another third baseman. Maybe he's a guy for the Braves if they wanted to make a move. Zach Britton has been hurt, but now he's coming back. He's coming back supposedly in June. Another guy who could be someone who people will definitely watch. And with the Texas Rangers, another team that there were reports now that they're open for business. Cole Hamels, who they acquired in a big trade from the Phillies at one point, he's somebody who definitely will be people will be watching.
No, I agree with all the names. I just, Machado is, obviously the biggest name and the most obvious. I wonder if the Orioles will, I think, based on their past history, I don't know if anyone will be able to offer enough or be willing to give up enough for 6 months of Machado to satisfy them, which I think they'd be shooting themselves in the foot as opposed to getting a, draft compensation. So,
we'll see.
Yeah. Anything about this season that, that has opened up your eyes? Because, I have to tell you, it's certainly, to me, it's been an interesting season. Young breakout players, Rays using a reliever to start 2 games in a row. Anything has stood out to you?
Well, a lot of the trends that we've seen the last few years have continued. More strikeouts, home runs being hit. We've seen shifts. We've seen, as you said, different uses of pitchers. The Rays creative, not just in using Sergio Romo to start back-to-back games, but earlier this year when they came out of spring training, having only 3 regular starters in their rotation and going with 2 so-called bullpen days where they would pick one of their long relievers to start and piece it together. Teams have always done that here and there, but to do it as a plan for two times through the 2 spots in the rotation was something different. So they understand that playing in the American League East with the payroll they have, with what they have to try some different things, and they're willing to. But we're used to that from the Rays. These ones are a little different, but we're used to them trying different things. So in a lot of ways, the things have gone, I wouldn't say according to plan or to expectations, but things that you're looking at and saying that's interesting and according to trend, I would say. We've got some super teams that we talked about earlier. The one thing that I think is more a case this year, it's also an extension of a trend, but it's something that has gone even more this year, is the number of teams that were not trying to win, that were trying to you can call it rebuilding or you can call it tanking. That's an extension of a trend, probably expected, partly because just of where a few different teams were in the cycle, but also in the way that the last few years we saw the Cubs and the Astros win after having had years where they traded people away and lost 100 games in a season, but then ended up winning a World Series. Now the thing is, when you have a lot of teams doing the same thing at the same time, only one of them is going to get the number 1 pick. They're not all going to end up benefiting from this as much as maybe they think they are or would like to. But that's another trend that's followed, and it's something I think to have some concern about because of the impact on the game. You go to watch games, it's not as much fun to go watch a game when you have teams that aren't putting in as much of an effort in to try to put a team together right now that can win. I don't want to say they're not trying to win, but they're not trying to win very hard this year.
No, I agree. Do you think at some point the commissioner will step in and try to implement something to,
Well,
I don't know, to deter it, but to
there are ways to
circumvent it?
deter it. Yeah, there are ways. I mean, look, what they've done in the last couple of negotiations in the base agreement, what they've done with the draft and signing pools and things like that has made finishing with the worst record more valuable. Now, you could make changes, but you can't make it immediately, but you could make changes over time if you wanted to not have as much value to having the worst record. If you don't want teams to compete to have the best record, the worst record, then don't make it as valuable to have the worst record. I mean, the NBA tried to address that at one time with the draft lottery. It hadn't completely worked. There are certainly teams that have tried in the NBA to finish in last, but because they went to the lottery system, and for the most part, to make it a little less valuable to finish with the worst record. And in baseball, you could argue that it's even more, there's even more reason to do something like that, or to change how the draft order is done and how the draft pools are done, because while the draft definitely helps teams become good, it helped the Astros and Cubs. The Cubs got Bryant and other guys. Like the Astros got Correa and McCullers and other guys. It definitely has helped those teams, but at the same time, it's not an immediate fix. You don't go in the NBA. You could take a guy number one and he might help you win the next year. Baseball, you're talking about a little longer term project. So you can argue that it would make sense not to tie it as closely to this year's record, who drafts first next year. But that would take negotiations. It's not going to happen immediately. We're not going to see a change today. But I think it is something that would be worth it for baseball to discuss on the longer term.
Do you think teams in baseball should be allowed to trade draft picks?
That's been brought up before. I don't know that they are allowed. There are a couple of draft picks that they are allowed to trade, but for the most part they're not. I don't know that would help a game. In some cases perhaps it would, but I think I don't have a real strong feeling on that.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Danny, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time. And I hope I can get you back a little more often. That's on me. I always remember to reach out to you when you're in Asia. So I'm going to try to keep you, a little more current in my head while the season is on. And hopefully earlier in the off season before you go away.
Okay. Good talking to you, Wayne.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Thanks for coming on. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Bye.
And folks, that's our show. I hope you enjoyed it. Danny Knobler. You can find him on the Bleacher Report. And we'll see you next time.